Hey, this is Matt once again. What about to the videos? Another paid request, this time for Alejandro. Thank you so much for that. And for those interested in requesting any type of videos, topics, reactions, commentaries, reviews, re-reviews, what have you, feel free to send it either directly to my PayPal or join my Patreon. Both links are down below in the info box. And this is for the Mask of Zorro from 1998, which I always enjoyed. I always thought it was a good film. I didn't grow up with the Zorro motif. Like, I knew of the character, but didn't see the Douglas Fairbanks and all the previous material. But I knew of the character, of course. Now, from what I understand, like, this was started, the wheels were going in the early 90s, and Steven Spielberg was involved. Not to direct, I don't think, but like produce and stuff. He got involved. And there were a few directors bandied about. Robert Rodriguez. In fact, I could be wrong, but I think the reason Antonio Banderas got cast is because Robert Rodriguez was going to direct it, and then something fell through, and then ultimately Martin Campbell directed it. Which was a good choice, because Martin Campbell had just done GoldenEye, which is my favorite James Bond film. You know, James Bond had been away for a few years, and it got reinvigorated because of GoldenEye. And if he could do that for James Bond, he can do that maybe for Zorro. And, of course, Martin Campbell would go on to do Casino Royale, among other movies. He's a pretty good director. I don't love everything he's done. I mean, I did not like The Foreigner with Jackie Chan. I thought that was very disappointing, because Jackie Chan felt like he was barely in the movie. I mean, it felt like it was more Pierce Brosnan's movie than Jackie Chan's film. It just felt like he didn't get to do much, as the trailer promised. In terms of acting, in terms of, like, he was a few baby steps, but not as full force as it should have been. And they got a great cast together. Anthony Hopkins as the original Zorro, and he just found out his daughter gets taken by the bad guys. He gets put in jail. One that leads to another. Many years later, he gets out. He wants revenge, but his daughter is banding about, thinking that this guy's her father. And then he finds Antonio Banderas, who he met as a kid. Antonio was a kid with his brother. And then as they grew up, Antonio's brother is murdered, and he wants revenge. So now they both have something in common. Anthony Hopkins wants revenge for his life being taken away in prison, and his daughter being taken and raised by the bad guy. The daughter grown up, played by Catherine Zeta-Jones. And Antonio Banderas wants revenge for the death of his brother. So Hopkins is going to teach Antonio the ways of being Zorro, and how to fight, how to use a sword, and also the morals of, it's not just about you, it's about helping the people. This is what Zorro represents, this is what Zorro's about. And it's a very, not the most original story, the older training the younger to take his place, but definitely a much more interesting story than the sequel, The Legend of Zorro, which you have the same director, you have the same actors, Antonio Banderas, Catherine Zeta-Jones, but much weaker movie, where there's a couple decent action set pieces, but didn't care for the kid, didn't care for the way they used Catherine Zeta-Jones in that movie. She was more of a sexy, exciting type of character in this, had a lot of spice to her, a lot of pizzazz. Anthony Hopkins definitely helps in this movie, and the setup of the story, the training, instead of in the sequel where they're happy but then they're separated, and Catherine Zeta-Jones can't say why. Then Zorro becomes a drunk and becomes a loser, and he's like, oh, no one wants me to be Zorro. And then annoying kid, and a little kid being a twerp, trying to be all this stupid stuff he's doing. Just a much lukewarm affair, the sequel. But this one, there's exciting action set pieces. Most of it's done practical. You got real good stunt work, going on horses and jumping over logs to land back on the horses. Great sword fights, well choreographed. I think the same guy that choreographed stuff for Highlander, at least the first Highlander, I believe, and The Princess Bride, I think it's the same choreographer, so he gets really stellar sword fight scenes, explosive ending, whether it be on this raised crates held together by rope, and they're having a sword fight going back and forth. Real practical explosions, not a lot of digital work. The bad guys, you got Stuart Wilson, who's the bad guy in Lethal Weapon 3 and Ninja Turtles 3. He did a pretty decent job here, as well as the one captain that killed Antonio's brother, who's a real psycho. I mean, he's taking jars of heads out to show to people. And the rest applies to bad guys. They're using these people to dig up this gold to buy back California, and they don't want to tell the guy, we're using your own gold to buy, we're taking your gold, and then we're going to pay you with your own gold, and we're going to buy back California. There's some fun bits of humor. Do you know how to use that thing? Yes. The pointy end goes into the other man. And it's a very exciting, fun adventure film. It's a very exciting, thrilling movie. And it's got a nice sweeping look to it. I think Martin Campbell, that's what makes it so weird. But then I realized that the guys who wrote the second film is Alex Kurtzman and Roberto Orci. The guys who helped write some of the Transformer films. The guys who helped work on the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies. And I'm like, oh, there's some films they've done I like, Cowboys and Aliens being one, but they've done a lot more bad than good. I'm like, oh, that makes a little bit more sense why that story and the sequel sucked. Go figure. Now, I know Anthony Hopkins, there's a bit of weirdness to it where, he's a British guy, and he's supposed to be playing a Spaniard. I have no issue. I mean, I'm sure people have issues with it. I just think Anthony Hopkins is a good actor, and I think he did a great job. He has a dignity, he's got intelligence, he's got all this attributes to him. And James Horner did the music, may rest in peace. He did a pretty capable job. Catherine Zeta-Jones, she has a bit of spunk to her. I mean, there's the famous scene where they're having the sword fight. He keeps getting pieces of her clothing off, and she's being very playful with it. I wonder if nowadays that'd be considered too sexist or whatever the hell. But a very fun, exciting adventure story. It did a nice job revitalizing the character. It did well at the box office, did well critically. And then it was quite a few years before there was a sequel, and maybe people wanted too much money, or they felt, well, I mean, maybe one movie's all you needed, which apparently that was the case. And then they did the sequel, and there was really a lack of interest. It's like, oh, okay, that was cool, but I don't really need to see more. Either they waited too long, or they picked the wrong story, or all the above. And I know Quentin Tarantino had this idea that he wanted to take his Django Unchained with Jamie Foxx, and then he wanted to take Antonio Banderas' Zorro and put them together in a movie. Now, there's a comic book that showcases this, but at one point Tarantino wanted to make a movie, and then that fell through. Would I have liked to have seen that movie? With Tarantino directing, yes, because it'd be interesting to see how Tarantino would deal with Zorro and Antonio Banderas coming back. That would have been very interesting. And I tried to think of Antonio. I don't think he's worked with Tarantino. I mean, he's worked with Robert Rodriguez, Tarantino's buddy, of course, but I don't think he's ever worked with Tarantino. I mean, Tarantino was in Desperado, and he got shot in the face. But I think of his filmography, I don't think he ever actually was directed. I don't think so. I could be wrong, but I'm trying to think of his movies. Not Pulp Fiction, not Reservoir Dogs, not Jackie Brown, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, no. Hateful Eight, no. Inglourious Basterds, no. I don't think he was in Grindhouse, no. Sin City, well, that's Frank Miller, so no. No, I don't think so. So, at least it would have been interesting to see. But I mean, it's not like I'm crying in my sleep over, oh, we didn't get it. I've been potentially a lot better than Legend of Zorro. So again, it had great choreography, stellar action scenes, sexy chemistry between Antonio and Captain Zeta, which they completely muddled in the sequel, which was ridiculous. Some pretty damn tremendous stunts. It has a good energy to it. Again, very lacking in the sequel, where you had this little kid who was an annoying twat waffle. The story was, I can barely remember what the hell the story was, and I've seen the film, so. But the Mask of Zorro, definitely worth a watch if you've ever seen this type of stuff. Just go watch the trailer. Even the trailer itself is more exciting than the whole Legend of Zorro movie. And it came out in 1998, pretty decent year for movies. And yeah, I don't know, it's a pretty straightforward film. Definitely worth a watch.